Hello, I am very happy to be here today with Raymond Gendreau, wonderful photographer and teacher, and does beautiful pieces that we have in our July show using a process called cyanotype. My name is Deborah Rosinski. I'm executive director of Bainbridge Arts and Crafts, and I'm excited to hear from Raymond and learn more about how he has come to do the work that he does. So Raymond, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I was asked to do this show, I believe in January. And the last time I showed at Bainbridge Arts and Craft was, I think, 3 years ago, and I had a couple of cyanotypes. I've been doing cyanotypes for the last, I'm going to say, 7 or 8 years, along with other photographic processes. I got reinterested in cyanotypes when one of my fellow professors had a sabbatical, and he taught a class in alternative processes. So no one else wanted to take the class on. So I remember doing this process in college many years ago, almost 50 years ago, and decided that, yeah, I want to revisit this. And what was interesting about it was that it was very much the traditional method, taking large format photographs with a view camera, contact printing them, and exposing it to sunlight. The process has changed a little bit because of digital technology. I can make a negative any size now and contact print it and, have my cyanotype. So it allows me to take a digital image, print a negative on a film called Pictorico, and I can make that image as big as 13 by 19 inches. I've kind of chosen to print on an 8.5 by 11 paper because when I kind of started the process, I thought I'm going to go big. But the bigger you get, the more inconsistent the coating is, because you're basically taking a piece of paper, the cyanotype solution, coating a piece of paper, and hoping that you didn't miss anything. Of course, when you get to a 13 by 19, there was a lot of problems and the cost was mounting. So I decided to go with the 8.5 by 11. One of the things that I like about cyanotypes is that it's very easy in terms of processing. You just basically wash it out with water. I use an Arches watercolor paper, which is hot press, which has got a real smooth surface. The edges around the paper I like to keep. The brush strokes around the cyanotype I like to show, because I like to show the whole process. A lot of times people will just kind of crop into it the way you crop into a normal photograph. But I like to show that this is a process that is, sometimes sloppy around the edges, sometimes a little inconsistent, but I think that's what I like about it. The images that I chose for this show are all in our area. There's a few from Bainbridge Island, my neighbor's yard, walks I've taken during the pandemic, like we all did. I mean, we were here on the island with a lot of time on our hands, and what a better place to have to be holed up. So there's a few photographs that I call pandemic photographs, and then there's a few photographs that are basically short road trips in the last few years. The imagery, I'm always looking for the abstract in a landscape, something that's very something that you would miss unless you looked at it real closely. What I want to do, I wanted to talk about this image here.
Uh-huh.
And the image that you guys have is printed a little bit darker.
Hmm.
And the cyanotype process is a lot like the darkroom. It's your times are inconsistent. Sometimes you'll print it at 2.5 minutes and it'll look too light. You add 15 seconds to it, it's a little bit better. You add 15 more seconds, it's just right. This particular image is one of these images that, standing near my house, overlooking Eagle Harbor at high tide, there's always stuff floating around. And I had seen this, and it looks like, it looks like an abstract painting. And I just like the fact that the sticks are an interesting pattern. If you can see this, this is the negative. So I'll put there you go.
Yeah.
So this is the negative that I printed on this acetate.
Uh-huh.
And I can change the density of the negative, the contrast, the tonality, all in Photoshop, and then print it out on that acetate. Sometimes I'll print something and it'll look perfect, and I'll try to make a cyanotype and realize that it's too thin, it's too thick, it's too contrasty. And then you kind of go back and adjust it. Same way you would do in a darkroom.
So you actually started playing around with a camera when you were in the military. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the story that I love to tell is I won a camera in a card game. So I became a photographer. But the real story is that I won a big pot in a card game, and I went to the ship store because I was on a carrier, and I had $300 in my pocket, and I decided, well, I'm going to buy myself something. And the guy at the ship store talked me into buying an SLR. And as a kid, I always had a little camera, a little Brownie and stuff like that, but never really knew what I was doing. So being stationed in the Mediterranean and having this camera and having time on my hands during leave, I would just go and hit the streets and photograph. Another fellow card player of mine gave me a Time Life series of books, which, back in those days, they were pretty important because they talked about darkroom and lighting and stuff like that. And I got kind of interested in the street photographers who were shown in the book, Henry Cartier-Bresson for one. Mm-hmm. And so I started going and, being in Spain, Greece, Italy, the street photography was pretty fun. So I took my photographs. And again, I'm getting information from my shipmates. You need to shoot this kind of film, you need to do this, you need to do that. So I ordered a few rolls of Kodachrome and went out and started taking photographs. So the photography process for me was pretty easy because I shoot the roll of film, and we'd send it off. And because we were, overseas, it took a while for it to get back, but I would get my slides back, and I had a little slide viewer, and I'd look at them, and I started to really appreciate what I was doing. So I was the type of person who, after high school, went to college and was a complete screw up and flunked out after about 1.5 years. So hence the Navy, because I got the notice from the government saying greetings. And so I had to choose something. So I ended up in the Navy, and that was, for me, a good thing because, I was in the Mediterranean and everybody else I knew was in Vietnam. So being on that side of the world was a lot safer. So after I decided, I need to go back to college, I think I'll be an art major. My parents didn't try to talk me out of it. They just said, yeah, whatever, just don't flunk out this time. And being an art major, you had to take all the art classes, but I was photography was my concentration, and I took to it pretty quickly. I loved the darkroom. I loved black and white printing. Black and white is still my first love when it comes to photography. Even though my first photography instructor said that black and white was dead, and this was in 1973. So he said that color was going to take over, and of course, he was pretty wrong, because black and white had a resurgence back then. And graduating with a photography degree, you say, well, I'm a photographer. So, I got together with some friends, and we opened up a studio doing what we thought was commercial work, and darkroom work for people. And then we started working with a real photographer, a real commercial photographer. This is a guy who had come down. This was in Florida, and he had come down to Florida for the lifestyle, and he was a New York photographer, and he kind of took us under his wing, and he said, you guys are pretty talented. You still, you're still wet behind the ears. And he showed us a lot of things, showed us how to light products and stuff like that. And after a certain period of time, he said, okay, you guys need to leave town now. And we're like, really? He goes, yeah, you need to leave town because there's not enough work here for 2 more good photographers. And you're not gonna be happy. So I ended up in Dallas, and Dallas was a kind of a booming graphic design and photography market. I worked for a big studio, and learned a lot about everything, shooting everything from lingerie to pots and pans. Not that that was what I wanted to do, but it made good money. Part of the fun of working for a big studio was that we had representatives who took our work around, showed our portfolios, and I was able to get magazine and editorial work because of that, which to me was closer to fine art photography than any part of the commercial world, because you had a lot of freedom. You were able to go out, and an art director wasn't looking over your shoulder, approving your shots. You came back a week later with the photographs, and a lot of times they hired you for your eye, your vision. And editorial work was a lot of fun, because it was almost like you were doing personal work, but you were getting paid for it. So moving forward, I had mild success as a commercial photographer. My wife and I moved here to Seattle 32 years ago. Seattle was a good market. It wasn't quite as booming as Dallas was, but I had a decent portfolio. I was able to pick up some clients, and we liked living here. Somewhere along the line, another Dallas expatriate photographer met me, and we chatted, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I've got a show coming up in Pioneer Square, and I think you should come and see it, blah blah blah. So he showed up, and it was all black and white darkroom prints. And he said, yeah, this is really nice stuff. He says, do you want to teach a darkroom class? And I said, oh, no, I don't want to teach a class. He goes, no, you'd be really good, because, I've got these students here. It's all adults, and, it's at the Art Institute, and you'd be good, because, we need somebody that has commercial experience, but also has kind of a fine art eye. So I taught a darkroom class, and I really liked it. Next quarter, I taught 2 darkroom classes. So as time went on, after probably 3 or 4 quarters, they had offered me a full-time position, which I decided to take. I still had my studio in Pioneer Square, and I still did some commercial assignments, but eventually, being a teacher kind of took over everything. And it was great because I learned as much from my students as they learned from me. I didn't tell them that, but that's kind of how it works. When digital technology started to take over the photographic world, I was a little nervous because, I'm technologically challenged when it comes to some of that stuff. So the students were real helpful because they knew more than I did a lot of times. It took me a couple of quarters to kind of get up to speed. And once that happened and I felt comfortable doing it, it was great. Teaching adults is a lot of fun because you become colleagues, especially if they're interested in what you're doing as well as you're interested in what they're doing. So there's a couple of photographs from this series that were taken. The 2 of the photographs taken in Seattle were taken while I was on field trips with students, which is my favorite way of teaching, because I come into the classroom, I say, okay, we're going on a field trip. We're going to do this, or we're going to concentrate on this. And so we would go on the field trip, and I would say, the thing is that I'm going to be out there photographing. You're going to be out there photographing. Don't bother me. So I would go and I would take my own photographs. And so we would come back, and, the next week in class, we would all look at each other's photographs and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what you're doing. I can see where this is successful. I can see where this is not successful. And I was able to show them what I did at the same time. I wasn't trying to compete with them, but I was just trying to show them that, this is what you need to think about when you're out photographing. And of course, sometimes, they would just blow me away with what they came up with. I had a reputation of a guy who would say, where did you shoot that? And they'd say, don't tell him, because they knew that I would go back and shoot what they had shot, but I really didn't do that. But I had that reputation, he's going to steal your images. I said, no. There was this one guy who had photographed this abandoned car. And, he was like, no, I'm never going to tell you where this is. I'm never going to, because I know you're going to photograph it. So the funny thing was that I found my own abandoned car a couple of weeks later, and I photographed. I said, I got a really great shot of an abandoned car. Who told you? Who told you where it was? I said, no. And I showed it to him. He goes, oh, that's not my car. I said, no, this is my car. So that's the kind of thing that we used to do. And this photograph here, let's see. This photograph here is Pioneer Square. And it's a painter painting flats to put up because of the protests. And this was like not the last series of protests, but a series of protests before. Seattle's a place that has a long history of protests and broken windows.
I recognized one image. I live in Bremerton, and I drive through Suquamish on the way to Bainbridge every day, and these sheds where they sell fireworks once a year and stuff.
Oh, yeah, Little Sis.
Yeah,
I
recognize that.
Yeah. I think that the writing has been painted over now.
Uh-huh.
I took this a while ago. I've always liked fireworks stands.
Yeah.
Anything that looks like it's going to be gone in a few years, I like to photograph it.
Well, it's amazing that they survive because they're only open once a year for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It's like, how does that happen? Anyway, so are you still teaching now in addition to?
No, I haven't been teaching for about 7 years now.
Mm.
So it's been, well, actually 6 years. Let's see, yeah, around 6 years. What happened was that the place I was working, Art Institute, started out as a good place to teach. Over a period of time, corporate interests kind of took over, and it became not such a good place to teach. I was offered early retirement with a severance. I took it. I think the place had run its course as far as I was concerned. I've always been a record and book collector. I used to do flea markets and stuff like that. And so my wife said, well, you need to do something with all this stuff you have. So I opened Backstreet Beat the end of 2015, just before Christmas. And it's been great ever since. I've got my store. I've got a place to come. I've got a spare room in the back where, I can keep my stuff and do my cyanotypes. So, and I'm out of the house,
You're not underfoot.
I'm not underfoot. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, and it makes everybody happy. And I don't bring stuff home anymore when I go to yard sales or thrift stores or whatever. It comes to the shop, and my wife's happy about that.
Well, I've certainly gotten some good finds from
yeah. Okay, good.
I'm glad you're around just down the street from us. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I like being a small shop owner, and I like being in Winslow. It's a great community. I have fun meeting the people that come in. We get a lot of people from Seattle, obviously, but we also get a lot of people from really all over the world.
You were talking about leaving the raw edges on your cyanotypes, and I personally really love that feeling that it gives them, because it does have kind of historical references.
Yeah, and I've seen in some of the history books, they'll show the whole thing, and I always like that process. Another thing that I did with this is I had my framer put foam core behind the mat so that the photograph floats a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, there's a waviness to the paper that, really doesn't come out. I mean, it does flatten a bit, but the waviness is, I think, part of the interest too. And by floating it in the frame, it kind of looks like what it looks like in the water, in the tray. And so I like that part of it as well. So
it captures some of the process.
Yeah.
And it freezes it.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you talk a little more about the material that you coat the paper with and what it's made up of? And
it's a process. It's two solutions. One is potassium ferrocyanide, and the other is I think it's iron salts, but it's got silver nitrate in it and everything. And it comes from a company called Photographer's Formulary, which is a company that does alternative printing chemistry. It comes in 2 bottles. You mix it together in low light. So you have basically a lamp with a red bulb in it. It doesn't have to be completely dark or anything when you coat it. You coat the paper. I use basically just a foam brush from the hardware store, and you coat the paper, and usually I give it 2 coats to make sure I don't have any holes or anything in it, and then put it aside, put it in a light tight box and let it dry. It usually takes about 4 or 5 hours to completely dry. And then the negative, which I print on a inkjet printer, is contact printed. I have a big contact printer. And when I first started this process, we would do this when I started the process in class. we did it summer quarter so that we would go out with our contact printer out in the sun and do it. And of course, you were timing it by sunlight. And if a cloud went across the sun, maybe your timing was going to be a little off. But one of the instructors designed a light box with UV light tubes. So that's what I have here at the shop. And it's nice because it's very consistent. So once you get your time down, it's every time you put it into the box, it's going to be the same time. You turn it on, you put your timer on. Generally 2.5 to 3 minutes is exposure time on these. So, and that's been pretty consistent with that light box.
And the contact printer, is that like a frame that clamps down?
Yeah, it's a wood frame with a piece of glass. It's got little things that you open up and you stick it in. It's actually a really nice piece of equipment that I got from B&H Photo in New York, and they have a lot of stuff, a lot of darkroom stuff that you can still find, and they just ship it to you. And this thing was handmade by somebody. I mean, it's like a piece of furniture. So, and it's big. I mean, it's 13 by 19. I was going to print. No, it's actually 16 by 20. Because I was going to print really big. So I don't need it that big anymore. But it still works.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a simple thing, really. I mean,
yeah.
The light goes through a barrier and passes through some areas and doesn't in others, right? I mean,
right. Yeah. I mean, it's like a negative. I mean, the denser the negative, the less light, and you end up with the image. When they started this process in the 1840s, they were making negatives on glass plates. So they just, would put the glass plate on the piece of paper and expose it to sunlight. And back then, I think the chemistry was probably different. They were probably much longer exposure times.
You mentioned Anna Atkins in your statement.
Anna Atkins, yeah, she. I didn't know anything about her up until recently, and I went to a alternative process show in Dallas when I was visiting relatives, and they had some of her work, and it's beautiful. It's like, wow, how come I don't know about this person? And I picked up the catalog, and there was information about her. And like I said in I think my statement, she was one of the first people to publish a book of art photographs. Her stuff was not, journalism or anything like that. It was just stuff that she had done using the cyanotype process. And, looking at these cyanotypes, which, when I was looking at them, were 100 and, I don't know, some years old, 150 years old, they still look really good. So hopefully the process is as stable as I think it is.
Well, Raymond, thank you so much. That was really a terrific,
Okay, well, I appreciate it. It was fun to do.
And we look forward to seeing you here soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Don't miss our latest exhibition featuring figurative sculpture by Morgan Brigg, cyanotype prints by Raymond Gendreau, and photography by Ken Smith at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts from July 1st through July 31st.